everyone, and welcome to another episode of Reconcilable Differences. I'm Phillip George Jr.
And I am Paul Smith of On the Move team.
Did you like it that time? Did you like how I let you just say your name? I didn't add
Actually, you kind of stunned me and surprised me. So there's a little bit of an awkward pause there. Oh, hey, I'm supposed to say who I am. All right. And by the way, we're coming from our studios. Live, by the way, from our studios in Cary, North Carolina.
Well, it's live when we talk.
I do want to say that I did try to get a special guest today.
Okay.
All right. I did. I tried to actually get Tom Brady to pop in.
Oh, yeah. Just randomly.
And yeah, well, I reached out to his people.
Is he pertinent to the topic?
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not.
No, that's not true, because our topic today is the OTP.
That's right.
And there's a T in Tom.
Okay, well, fair enough.
And actually, I was about to say that there's a B in purchase, but there's not.
There's not. No.
There's not.
I will say as well, we do have a special guest series. We're going to be releasing a couple of those out. They're not already out there, so please check those out. Tom Brady is not one of those guests yet. Okay. So the OTP that Paul says is the offer to purchase and contract in North Carolina. Majority, I would say, 95% of the contracts or more are written on that form.
I don't know the percentage, but that's a good guess.
Yeah, it's a rough guess. Again, I'm not giving definitive numbers here. I'm just saying most of the time, unless you're doing a builder's contract or a contract for vacant land, it's going to be on the OTP.
Well, it's still an OTP. It's just vacant.
That's right. It's a different number. I'm talking specifically today about the 2T, the offer to purchase and contract for, again, residential purchase. Okay? And so
I have a question for you.
Okay, right. Shoot.
Okay. How did
Question for me or for them?
For the world.
Okay.
For the world, including you.
Okay.
All right. So
I'm including
where did they come up with 2T? Like, what does the T stand for?
I don't know how they name all these things. There's a bunch of weird numbers in there for our forms.
Make a note that we're going to reach out to NCR.
And just find out how they name them.
And just find out how you came up with 2T.
Well, keep in mind, these forms are a collaboration between NAR and the board, or what do you call it?
Well, NCR and the
attorney. What do you call the attorney board?
The Bar Association.
The bar. That's right. That's what I was trying to think of.
Yeah. I was just going to say, but what do they call them guys?
Those guys. Use guys. So, number one, let me just be very clear about this. The offer to purchase and contract, the 2T, is 17 pages long, and there's a lot of terms in there, and every term is negotiable. Every term.
If it's blank.
That's right.
Like the address isn't negotiable.
No, that's the address.
But I get your point. But there's a lot of negotiable
You bring up a great point, though, when you talk about the address. So addresses can change and they're subjective. When you're selling real property, it takes more than just the address, right? So you got a parcel identification number. You have a plat book and map. You have a subdivision, a lot. And the most important thing, in my opinion, is the deed booking page, because that's where all those other things come from. Would you agree with that, Paul?
Yes. So now I have a question for you.
Okay.
Because listen, you and I.
Me or them?
You. I have a question for you.
Specifically,
it applies to them too.
Okay.
But by the way, when I say them, I mean all of you out there in
you guys,
reconcilable differences world. When you got a listing and you get an offer, all right?
Okay.
And you look at the offer and it's like half the things aren't filled out, or the information that is filled out is mostly wrong. Don't you want to just put that through the shredder?
I do, but we're duty bound to convey it to our clients. However, I will say it makes me think a little certain way about the preparer.
God.
Right?
Yeah.
Not saying anything bad about anybody, but again, it's your job to fill it out, and there's guidelines to how to fill it out.
That's a very good point.
Yeah, and you shouldn't have blank spots. If it's not applicable, then put in. Other than that, you should probably have something in every blank, and every blank is a negotiable term.
Well,
some of these terms are.
I believe this is accurate, by the way, when you talk about no blanks. And I apologize.
No, go ahead.
We're going to jump into
the terms. We're going to get into it.
But, back when the offer to purchase was like 4 pages when I got into real estate, before all the progress took place, and I had a couple of great mentors, and I believe in giving credit where credit is due. But my mentors when I first got into the business were Minnie Carroll and Rodney Carroll, and they gave me a great. Actually, I have to add Margaret Skelly as well. Margaret Skelly was a real estate agent that was basically an admin transaction person for Rodney.
Are any of these folks still around?
Yeah, Rodney is still around and active in the business. I believe Minnie may have passed away.
Okay.
Forgive me, but and Margaret, I believe, is still around. I don't think she's in real estate, but they kind of took me under their wing about the paperwork, and they give me a really great foundation about how things work and completing things. But I learned how to fill out the paperwork, and we train our agents on the team to do this as well.
Yep.
And I trained every agent that was in any franchise
trained
I
me.
owned. Yep, or the independent company that I started. I used the guidelines from NCR to learn how to fill out the offer to purchase and other things like buyer agency agreement and exclusive right to sell listing agreement, because there's great information there about how to do things and where to find information. So they're a great source.
Right. Well, that's why the guidelines are there. That's the whole point. That's why they make them. Some of the key terms to think about, these are negotiable things. Obviously, the purchase price is probably the biggest one. That's usually what people tend to focus on, whether you're the buyer or the seller. Another one is the due diligence fee. So if you're not, again,
The money.
When we talk about terms, we talk about the offer to purchase, we talk about North Carolina. That's where we do our business. And in North Carolina, there's a due diligence fee and a process and a period of time. All these things are negotiable. The fee is negotiable. It's between the seller and the buyer and what they'll agree to. The due diligence date, that period, that time is a negotiable term. And it's whatever the seller, obviously, if you're the buyer, you want a very long due diligence. Take your time in checking that property out. If you're the seller, you want a short due diligence. You want that buyer committed as soon as possible. Personal property can be a term and a factor into the conversation. For instance, a refrigerator, Paul, is personal property. You're not guaranteed to get a refrigerator with the house.
Apparently, that might not be true in Rocky Mount, from what we learned in one transaction.
Well, that's a whole different conversation for another day, but I agree with
apparently
you.
the law doesn't necessarily apply in Rocky Mount either.
Well, again, a different conversation. So with that being said, fixtures are items that are attached to the property. And the best way I've come up with, and I think I'm not going to give credit because I don't remember who said this to me, but the best way to describe it is if you took the house and you turned it upside down, everything that didn't fall is a fixture. It's attached to the property. But these are the reason why I bring this up as a negotiable term, because if you're a seller or if you're a buyer and you're looking at a house, and I'm going to use the chandelier, you have an heirloom, chandelier that's been in the family for years, and you just got to have that chandelier and you got to take it to the next property. As a listing agent, I'm going to tell you to take it down and replace it. Just go ahead and get it out of there.
So to carry what you just said to an extreme,
Okay.
as I often do.
Okay, fair enough.
If you're in your nursery and you had nailed the crib to the floor and then strapped your baby in, and you pick the house up and down and didn't move,
Right.
does the baby in the crib become a fixture?
I don't think I'm qualified to answer that question, but the crib would absolutely be a fixture at that point because you've screwed it to the floor.
Okay, that's probably an extreme, but
It is a little bit extreme. It is a little bit. You don't want
somebody's asked that.
You don't want to convey your baby. You don't. It's important to you. Make sure it's in the contract.
The reason why it's so many pages now is because there's a lot of verbiage in there trying to clarify what something.
Absolutely.
And the guidelines kind of do that too. So that brings up a good point.
Well, going back to fixtures, they had to modify and change because, the bathroom mirrors were always attached to the wall and as a part of that, I think about it as the sheet mirror, just a giant mirror. But then we got fancy HGTV and people started putting decorative mirrors up that they just hung up like a picture. Well, then everybody would, sell their home and then they would take those picture mirrors. They would take them and then the buyer would show up and have no mirrors in their bathroom. So they had to add that to the fixture list. So again, just keep in mind that you want to talk all this through with your agent, whether you're on the buyer or the selling side. Another term is your closing date. Depending on your lending or financing, how you're doing it, that's going to be dictated by that a lot of times, whether the lender can get it done inside of 30 or 45 days. And then if the seller, can they accommodate? Maybe they need a fast closing. Maybe they're building a house and they need a long closing, etc. So all these things are negotiable. And then also, Paul, what about your financial considerations? So you actually have to, on the offer to purchase, tell the seller how you intend to buy the property.
To be used as a guide.
That's
about
right.
How you're going to complete it.
That's right.
Because as we know, financing, getting a loan, is not a condition of you buying that property.
Absolutely. And if you're asking the seller for closing costs, that there's a spot for that.
Yep.
There's a spot for the home warranty. Again, there's a lot of different things on this contract and they're all negotiable. One thing that I like to point out here is I did a deal with somebody a few years ago, and it was an elderly gentleman, didn't even use emails. Didn't even use email. In fact, his wife had to do the email.
Yeah.
And then I go to his office, I think, to drop off the check, the due diligence check. And he'd been in real estate so long that on the wall in his office, he had the contract, the offer to purchase, what I would consider the original form, because it was only one page. It was literally one page. It's 17 pages now. And the 17th page is the notification or acknowledgement of monies. So go ahead, Paul.
And you do realize that it's gotten longer simply because of issues and problems and complaints that have developed over the years.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, are you done with your process, or do you have some other blanks that you want to cover there?
I have some other points, but not necessarily. Other than on section 14,
Yeah.
that's where you identify addendum. So
Yeah.
like your FHA addendum, additional provisions addendum, buyer possession, all those different things are there. And then there's another little section where any party drafted addendum or attorney drafted addendum. So for instance, you wanted something specific in this contract and you had an attorney write it up, or the buyer writes something up. Your agent should not be drafting documents because that is an attorney activity.
It's
right.
legal.
That's right. It's
For us to
illegal.
do that.
So you either write it yourself or you have an attorney do it, and you want an attorney to do it so they get the language right. Dot their I's, cross their T's, kind of thing. Paul, I got a lot more like just points to point out. For example, disclosures like the NCPD, the mineral oil and gas rights. Those are a part of the contract.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thus, the boxes there that you check.
Correct. I'm giving some knowledge to the people out there.
Yep.
They've modified it to have a section that in the beginning, I think it's on page 1, that shows whether there be a mobile home included, or if there's like I'm selling one right now that has an off-site septic repair area. So that lot, that extra little piece of lot where your leach field is actually a part of this deed and a part of this transaction. It has to be notated.
Yep, I agree. I'm picturing it in my mind as you're saying.
Okay. I have one other thing to ask you here. What do you think about buyer love letters?
I do not encourage people to do that, and we are encouraged to ask clients to refrain from doing it.
Yeah, there's a section in the listing paperwork now that actually
In the buyer agency agreement.
and the buyer agency agreement that actually talks about this, that you should not do it. I've always advised not to do it because you're giving information away that's not pertinent to the purchase. You may think it's going to make you stand out to that seller, but it can also be used against you. It can be used to discriminate. It can be used for again, information is power.
And it could be against federal housing laws as
That's
well.
right. That's right. So we don't do it, and we don't recommend that you do it.
Yeah, but we can't stop you from doing it. You're just going to have to deliver it yourself.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
The other thing I'd like to point out, Paul, and I know you're going to jump in and you got a lot to say about this. Again, we could do a whole, multiple episodes on just one section at a time of the offer to purchase and how it matters to you. And we may break it down in future shows, but right now, just trying to give you the overview. So going back to that, as a part of your agency paperwork that you do with your agent, whether it's listing or buying, you're going to get some sample documents that we have to give you. One of the sample documents is a sample offer to purchase and contract. Read it. And the reason why I'm saying it so strongly is because you don't want to get to the point where all the numbers are on that contract, all these terms are on there for you to understand what it actually is saying. Go ahead and read that. Ask your questions ahead of time. Mm-hmm. Make sure that you understand the ramifications of each section.
Yep. So, either way, even if they haven't read it, when the time comes and an offer is being made, we will go through the offer to purchase in detail with you.
Absolutely.
And that brings me to something that I want to mention, all right? Because I know agents may do this differently and firms may teach this differently, but as I said, I was kind of taught a way to do this back in the day that made sense to me. And when I'm going to sit down and do an offer to purchase, I get certain questions answered first when I'm representing a buyer by the listing agent. some of which you already mentioned. Does the seller have any specific closing needs that they would favor? All right, like a rent back, okay, or close out in an extended date, that type of thing. But for some reason, because my person's offer maybe looked more favorably at that. Would they prefer to leave some personal property rather than give it up? That kind of thing. All right, and so when I sit down to fill it out, I don't start with the purchase price.
Okay.
I actually want to start with when my buyers would like to close based upon what we've learned about the sellers and what we know if they're doing financing or even if they're doing cash, what dates work best to get things done, especially from the financing end. So I start with the closing date.
Okay.
And then I kind of work my way back towards the numbers, if you will.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
Because if I have a closing date.
That's a little different. Yeah, I got you.
If I have a closing date of, say, 30 days, because that's what the lender needs, and I know that works for my folks,
Right.
and I also know that the lender can turn around an appraisal in, say, 14 days, we get all our inspections done in that 14 days, then I know how to set the due diligence period.
Okay.
Okay. All right.
Yep.
And then once I have that, I have the dates all square. Then I get to the money.
Okay.
All right. And because I know as you're going through the offer, if I found that I didn't start in those places, the dynamics might change a little bit in terms of dates.
Okay.
Okay, so I just get all the dates out of the way, then I get to purchase price, due diligence fee, earnest money if any, deposit, all that stuff.
Okay.
All right.
I got you.
And then at that point, I've got the major stuff out of the way. And I explain the dynamics of all that and the importance of all those things, especially the money.
Okay.
If we haven't done
I
it
got you.
before.
That makes
And then I
sense.
just get to the rest of the offer, if you will.
I would say I do it a little bit different. I tend to go in order.
You're not alone.
Everything on that first page, second page, and then I check it
alone.
when I come back through. You know what I mean?
You're not alone. You're not alone.
But I like the way you're thinking.
A lot of folks do it that way. All right. It's just I found that I eliminate a lot of uncertainties and questions if I do it that way as I'm going through the offer in its entirety.
I got you. Well, again, it's a complicated form. Like I said, 17 pages. There's a lot of terms, a lot of things, and all of them apply and can cost you time, effort, and money. So you want to be clear with those. You want to ask good questions. You want to review everything with your agent thoroughly. Anything else to add about the OTP right now, Paul?
When you've filled it out, review it,
Absolutely.
and then review it again. Okay, go over it with your client before you send it off.
Yeah.
All right. Verify that the other party has received it. Confirm it. And hey, I've sent you an email, with an offer to purchase for 123 Main Street. Please confirm receipt. Text them as well. Especially when the market was insane. It's like agents were busy. You weren't sure whether they got it or not. All right.
Yeah, and keep in mind that we say review everything with your agent, and we're going to review it with our clients, but we're not attorneys. So you need to read it. It's pretty plain English, but if you have any real concern that we can't seem to answer, then your next step would be to talk to an attorney, and we have one we'd recommend.
Absolutely.
Right? Is that right?
Yep. There's always that option if the buyer or seller, depending on the situation, prefers or has questions from a legal standpoint that we can't answer. Absolutely. We're not attorneys.
That's right.
So, anything to add?
I think for now,
I mean, we could
again,
we could do 3 hours on
we
this.
really could.
Yeah,
we
we
may
could.
pull up, for example, in the future, we may do an episode, and because again, we're talking to buyers and sellers. We're also talking to agents out there that might be viewing this, thinking about joining a team. We may do some breakdown on just how to fill out the first section and then maybe the second section to show you some in great detail, because again, it's a complicated form,
It is, but I'll tell you, when I get an offer on a listing that I have, and I'm looking at an offer that it's like a Picasso. I mean, it's like I would write it. Like it's perfect. Now the numbers may not be what I would prefer to present to my seller, but I mean, it's complete. It's such a pleasure because then I don't have to worry about any of that. I can just get to the meaty pieces that I need to negotiate.
And I'll tell you something else. When you don't fill it out completely, there may be a term that blows the deal all up. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you don't put in closing costs and you're like, oh, by the way, my client well, that should have been in there, because that changes everything. And the other thing is, for you guys out there in the public, if you're planning on going FHA or VA, You need to put that up front. Don't put conventional and then try to change it, because that requires the seller to sign an addendum and allow you to do that.
Which they're not required to do.
And they're not required to do it. So again, you want to, to be honest and represent what you plan on doing as the best of your ability when you're putting in the OTP.
I should
purchase.
rephrase that. For the buyer to complete the transaction, the seller has to sign that.
That's correct. Okay? Yeah.
But the seller is not obligated to sign it.
That's right.
As a condition of the contract, because that wasn't the financing or the addendum that you initially presented.
That's right. Absolutely.
Well, we could go on, but we got to stop this somewhere. All right. So I want to remind folks, that they need to like, subscribe, and please comment about reconcilable differences. We appreciate your input and your feedback, and remember, good selling.